Carl Jung uses the term Syzygy to refer to the masculine and feminine principles that are yoked together in the human psyche. This figure shows an abstract representation of the psyche. We start with the ego at the top. Next comes the shadow, drawn in a way to indicate that the shadow is cast because of the light of the ego. As one goes deeper, there is the Syzygy, the masculine and feminine principles represented by the anima in the man and animus in the woman. Deeper still comes the self, first in its personal manifestations, then in its more collective ones as history, world, and then as the total space-time continuum. The figure also illustrates how the masculine and feminine egos approach the self through their contrasexual components. In the middle of the diagram, there is a kind of neutral ego that sneaks right between the masculine and feminine principles, which is an ideal situation that does not really exist. On the left-hand side is the feminine ego, which in order to get to the self must go through the animus. Similarly, the masculine ego has to go through the anima. Jung tells us that the anima and animus in the psyche are composed of three factors: the contrasexual qualities of the individual, the archetypal image, and the person's life experience of the opposite sex. The first two factors are innate. The third, that is one's life experience of the opposite sex, is acquired. In the third factor, the experience of the mother and father is overwhelmingly important, but the parents are not the only ones to contribute the acquired characteristics. The major contributors to the anima experience in the man, in addition to the mother, are the sister, the daughter, the lover, the wife, and companion. Those are all on the acquired level. Behind those personal experiences will be the archetypal factors, which will be met as divine guide and source of inspiration, or evil seductress, or a personification of fate or destiny or life itself, and finally, the principle of eros. In the woman's animus experience, there will be a similar factors. First of all, the father, then brother, son, lover, husband, and companion, all on the personal acquired level. At the archetypal level may be found the divine guide and source of inspiration, or the evil assaulter, or the personification of spiritual meaning, and finally, the principle of logos. There are four different stages of the ego's relation to the anima or animus: the infantile state, the projected state, the possessed state, and the conscious state. The infantile state is the original one of symbolic mother-son or father-daughter incest. Jung describes man's infantile relation to the anima as such. His eros is passive like a child's. He hopes to be caught, sucked in, enveloped, and devoured. He seeks, as it were, the protecting, nourishing, charm circle of the mother, the condition of the infant released from every care, in which the outside world bends over him and even forces happiness upon him. No wonder the real world vanishes from sight. Often, a mother appears beside him who apparently shows not the slightest concern that her little son should become a man, but who, with tireless and self-immolating effort, neglects nothing that might hinder him from growing up and marrying. You behold the secret conspiracy between mother and son, and how each helps the other to betray life. In case of woman's infantile relation to father, Jung says, the dark sun of feminine psychology is connected with the father imago. Since the father is the first carrier of the animus image, he endows the virtual image with substance and form, for on account of his logos, he is the source of spirit for the daughter. Unfortunately, this source is often tainted just where we would expect clean water. For the spirit that benefits a woman is not mere intellect, it is far more, it is an attitude, the spirit by which a man lives. Even a so-called ideal spirit is not always the best if it does not understand how to deal adequately with nature, that is, with the animal man. This really would be ideal. Hence, every father is given the opportunity to corrupt, in one way or another, his daughter's nature, And the educator, husband, or psychiatrist then has to face the backlash. For what has been spoiled by the father can only be made good by a father. These passages tells us that the danger for the son in the mother complex is that it will poison his masculine urge to engage life, and that for the daughter, the danger of the father complex is that it will corrupt her relation to spirit or to meaning. These are the perils of the infantile relation to the anima or animus. In the second or projected state, the anima and the animus are experienced in projection upon a member of the opposite sex. Further distinction can be made between remote and nearby projections. Remote projections may refer to things such as the adultation of movie stars and rock singers and other groupie phenomena. A collective projection is usually participated in by a whole group, and the projection carrier is not available to provide any corrective response. So the projection has a sizable infantile component. Nearby projections get closer to home, and this leads one into actual life encounters in which the projected image is contrasted with the reality of the person carrying the projection. That results in greater consciousness. The third stage of relation to anima animus is called the possessed state. The anima possessed man and the animus possessed woman. When a man is anima possessed, a condition that usually comes and goes with moods, he is sensitive and resentful, and his feelings are very easily hurt. The key characteristic for the anima possessed man is resentment, disappointed attitude. Another way of putting it would be that the anima possessed man is inappropriately soft. The animus possessed woman, on the other hand, is quite the reverse. She is opinionated, argumentative, brittle. When the animus state is uppermost, she is inappropriately hard. Finally, the fourth state would be the conscious relation to anima or animus. At this stage of things, anima and animus represent functions which filter the contents of the collective unconscious through the conscious mind. When the ego has a conscious relation to animus or anima, it is no longer subject to possession, and the contrasexual element becomes a conduit by which the contents of the collective unconscious can move from unconscious to the ego. This conscious relation to the anima or animus leads to an attitude that gives regular attention to the unconscious. The ultimate goal of these masculine and feminine principles, which make up the Syzygy, is the cornyantio, their union. This dynamic, the urge of the Syzygy to achieve the cornyantio, lives itself out in external life in a fairly typical way. A man and woman fall in love. In other words, they fall into mutual anima and animus projection. That stage of things is really delicious. Each is convinced that he or she has found a soulmate in the other, and there is a blissful feeling of wholeness whenever they are together. On the other hand, there is a very painful sense of loss when they are apart. This initial state of things, because it is largely unconscious, usually cannot last long. It generally evolves into one of these three ways. One possibility is that the concrete cornyantio proceeds in life, so that there is marriage, family, and a joint life, and the libido that has been flowing between the anima and animus projection is progressively led into the effort of developing a concrete existence together. The second possibility is that instead of a concrete cornyantio, there will be a concrete separatio. In other words, the projection drops off for one or the other. It drops off for one person and then the other is abandoned. When that happens, the rejected one is exposed to grief and despair and sometimes resorts to violence. Extremes of despair or violence are activated because one has lost one's soulmate, and this is experienced as a total defeat, a failure of the possibility of cornyantio. The despair leads to destruction. The alternative is the realization that other person was not the essential thing. Then one starts to make connection with the anima or animus internally. This has been expressed as when half gods go, the gods arrive. The third possibility is that progressive development occurs in the midst of the mutual projection. The individuals gradually discover that their in-loveness is based on a projection of the anima or animus. But as a consequence of having been the carriers of that projection, they are also led to the discovery of and the capacity for conscious object love. Then it becomes possible to love the partner as he or she actually is, also simultaneously developing and maintaining a living connection to the inner image of the animus or the anima.